My mother slapped the bank statement down on the kitchen table like it was evidence in a murder trial. "You owe this family," she said. My father stood behind her with his arms crossed, silent in that way he always was when he wanted someone else to do the cutting for him. My younger brother Daniel leaned against the counter with a half smile on his face, pretending to scroll through his phone. And me? I stared at the paper. Not because I was afraid, because for the first time in 29 years, I finally understood what they had been hiding. There it was, my name, my account, my signature, and a transfer I had never approved. $48,700, sent out of an account my parents swore had been empty since I was 18. That was the moment I realized my family had not just taken my money, they had built an entire version of my life around a lie. And the worst part? They were still standing there, expecting me to apologize. My mother tapped the paper with one sharp red fingernail. "Don't look so shocked, Claire. This is what family does. We help each other." I looked up slowly. Help each other? Daniel snorted. "Here we go." I turned to him. "Did you know?" He looked away a second too fast. That was answer enough. My father finally spoke. "Your brother needs this opportunity. The restaurant is expanding. We need liquidity." I almost laughed. Liquidity. That was the word he used when he wanted theft to sound professional. "You mean Daniel needs money again?" My mother's face hardened. "He is trying to build something." So was I. The room went quiet. That sentence landed heavier than I expected, because everyone in that kitchen knew what I meant. They knew about the scholarship I lost because my parents forgot to send the required financial documents. They knew about the apartment I gave up because they begged me to help with Daniel's first business idea. They knew about the nights I worked double shifts while Daniel posed online as a young entrepreneur. But in my family, memory was selective. Pain only counted when it belonged to the favorite child. My father sighed like I was exhausting him. "Claire, you've always been independent. Daniel needs support." There it was, the family motto. Claire can survive anything, Daniel needs help. My mother pushed the bank statement closer. "You signed the authorization." "No," I said quietly. "I didn't." Daniel's thumb stopped moving on his phone. My mother blinked. "What?" "I didn't sign that." She gave a small laugh. "Don't be dramatic." I picked up the paper. The signature was close, very close, but not close enough. Whoever had copied it had made one mistake. They used the way I signed my name now, not the way I signed it 8 years ago when that account was opened. My stomach tightened, because that meant the transfer was recent. Not years ago, not some old mistake. Recent. I looked at my father. "When was this done?" He didn't answer. My mother said, "That's not the point." "That is exactly the point." Daniel shoved his phone in his pocket. "Can we not turn this into one of your victim speeches?" I smiled, not because anything was funny, because I had spent almost my entire life trying not to become bitter, and in that moment, I felt something colder than bitterness. Clarity. "I want to see the full account history." My mother stood up straighter. "You don't get to demand things in my house." "My name is on the account." "Because we put it there." I looked at her. That sentence slipped out before she could stop it. For years, they told me the account was mine, my college savings, my emergency fund, the money my grandmother left for Claire's future. Then, when I turned 18, they told me it was gone. Bills, medical expenses, family problems, things I was too young to understand. I believed them. Of course I believed them. They were my parents. But now my mother had just said, "Because we put it there." Not Grandma, not me, we. I folded the bank statement and placed it into my purse. My father stepped forward. "Leave that." I looked at him. For the first time, he looked nervous. Not angry, nervous. And that scared me more than the money, because my father had never been afraid of hurting me. He was only afraid of being exposed. "I'm taking it," I said. Daniel moved toward the table. I didn't raise my voice. "Touch my bag and I call the police." He froze. My mother's mouth opened. "You would call the police on your own brother?" I looked at all three of them. "No," I said. "I'd call the police on whoever forged my signature." That was the first time nobody had anything to say. I walked out of that kitchen with my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock my car. But I didn't cry. Not then. I waited until I was 3 blocks away, parked behind a closed pharmacy under a flickering streetlight, with the folded bank statement on the passenger seat. Then I broke. Not because of the money. Money can be earned again. I cried because a piece of me had still believed there was a line they would never cross. And now I knew. There had never been a line, only a price. For Daniel, that price was always my life. The next morning, I called the bank. I expected resistance. I expected forms, delays, transfers, polite voices telling me they couldn't help. Instead, after 20 minutes of verification, the woman on the phone went silent. "Ms. Bennett," she said carefully, "I need to ask you something." My fingers tightened around the mug in my hand. "Okay. Are you aware there have been multiple withdrawals from this account over the past 11 years? The room seemed to tilt. "Multiple?" "Yes." "How many?" A pause. 26. I sat down. The chair hit the floor harder than I meant it to. "Can you send me the records?" "We can provide statements, but given the age of some transactions, you may need to submit a formal request." "I'll submit whatever I need to." Another pause. Then her voice changed. Not colder, kinder. "Ms. Bennett, some of these transfers were made after you were legally an adult." I closed my eyes. That meant something. I didn't know exactly what yet, but I knew enough. "Were they authorized by me?" "I can't determine that over the phone." "But you can see signatures." "I can see scanned documents." My heart started pounding. "And?" She lowered her voice slightly. "I would recommend you speak with an attorney." That sentence stayed in the air long after the call ended. An attorney. Not customer service, not a family conversation. An attorney. For years, my parents had told me I was cold because I asked questions, ungrateful because I remembered details, selfish because I refused to keep sacrificing for Daniel. But banks don't recommend attorneys because a daughter is being dramatic. Banks recommend attorneys when paper trails start looking like crimes. I spent the next 3 hours digging through old boxes in my closet. Tax forms, old pay stubs, birthday cards from my grandmother, a folder from high school with scholarship letters I had not looked at in years. And then I found it. A blue envelope with my name written in my grandmother's shaky handwriting. "Claire, for when they try to make you doubt yourself." My throat tightened before I even opened it. Inside was a letter. Not long, just 1 page. But by the time I reached the second paragraph, I had to sit on the floor. My grandmother had written that she set aside money for me. Not a little, not help with books money. A real amount. Enough for college. Enough for a first apartment. Enough to give me a start. She wrote that she had concerns about my parents. She wrote that my mother believed Daniel needed more help and that my father always followed whichever child brought him the most pride. Then came the line that made my hands go numb. I have instructed that this account remain under your name, with your parents listed only as temporary custodians until you turn 18. Temporary custodians, not owners, not family managers. Temporary. I read the letter 3 times. Then I read it again. And then, for reasons I still don't fully understand, I started laughing. It was not a happy laugh. It was the sound a person makes when the story they've been living suddenly splits open and shows the machinery underneath. My entire adulthood had been shaped by one belief. There was no money, no safety net, no choice. So I worked. I missed parties. I turned down unpaid internships. I dropped out of the university I wanted and went to community college at night. I told myself I was strong, independent, practical, and maybe I was, but I had not chosen that life freely. My family had chosen it for me. Then they had praised me for surviving what they caused. That night, Daniel called. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear what lie came next. "Mom's upset," he said. No hello, no apology, just Mom's upset. I stared at the letter on my kitchen table. "Is she?" "You embarrassed her." "I found out someone forged my signature." He exhaled loudly. "Claire, come on." "Say it." "Say what?" "That you knew." He was quiet. Then he said, "You always make things so black and white." I smiled at the wall. That was Daniel's gift. He could make theft sound like philosophy. "It's pretty black and white when my name is on the document." "You don't understand what was happening back then." "Back when?" He didn't answer. I stood slowly. "Daniel." "It wasn't just one thing," he snapped. "Okay? Dad's business was failing. Mom was stressed. Grandma was interfering. You were going to leave anyway." I stopped breathing for a second. There it was. Not denial, justification. "You used my money because I was going to leave?" "You act like you were abandoned," he said, "but you wanted out." I stayed. "You stayed because they paid for you to stay." "That's not fair." "No," I said. "What's not fair is finding out my whole family used me as a bank account." He laughed bitterly. "You always thought you were better than us." "No, Daniel. I thought you were my brother." That shut him up. For maybe 2 seconds. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. "You should be careful before you start digging. You might not like what you find." The call ended. I stood there with the phone in my hand, staring at the screen. That was not a warning people give when they are innocent. That was a warning people give when they know there is more. And he was right. I did not like what I found. The next morning, I took a personal day from work and drove to the county records office. I told myself I was only checking one thing. Just one. My grandmother's estate filings. I wanted confirmation. Something official, something that could not be explained away by Mom's tears, or Dad's silence, or Daniel's smirk. The clerk was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She looked bored until I gave her my grandmother's full name. Then she paused. "Your family?" "Granddaughter." She typed something, frowned, typed again. "There were amendments." "To the will?" "Yes." "How many?" She looked at the screen. 3. My grandmother had never mentioned amendments. "Can I see them?" "You can request copies." "I'd like to." She printed a form and slid it toward me. While I filled it out, she asked, "Are you Claire?" My pen stopped. Yes. Her expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. My mother knew your grandmother, she said. I looked up. She did? She used to come in here. Very sharp woman. I swallowed. She was. The clerk hesitated. Then she said, she came in once very upset, years ago. Said she was worried a child in the family was being taken advantage of. My fingers tightened around the pen. Did she say which child? The woman looked at the form, then back at me. She didn't need to. I left with copies in a brown envelope and sat in my car for almost 10 minutes before opening it. The First Amendment was simple. My grandmother increased the amount set aside for me. The second added instructions about education expenses. The third made my vision blur. If any custodian, parent, or family member attempts to redirect, withdraw, conceal, or misuse funds intended for Claire Bennett, then all remaining assets allocated to Daniel Bennett shall be frozen pending review. I read it again. And again. My grandmother knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. She knew Daniel was the center of my parents' world. She knew I was the one expected to understand, to sacrifice, to be mature. So she built a trap. Not out of revenge, out of protection, and my parents had walked straight into it. But the strangest part was at the bottom, a name I did not recognize. Attorney of record, Marcus Hale. I searched him in the parking lot. Retired estate lawyer, small office downtown, still listed as active by appointment. I called before I could talk myself out of it. A receptionist answered. When I said my grandmother's name, she put me on hold. Less than a minute later, a man came on the line. Older voice. Calm. Careful. Ms. Bennett? Yes. I wondered when you would call. My whole body went still. You know who I am? Yes, he said. Your grandmother made sure of that. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. What does that mean? It means, he said, that your bank statement is only the beginning. For a few seconds, I forgot how to speak. I sat in my car outside the county records office, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. What do you mean it's only the beginning? On the other end of the line, Marcus Hale exhaled slowly. The kind of thing that should not be discussed over the phone. My stomach tightened. Did my parents steal more money? A pause. Ms. Bennett, how soon can you come to my office? That was not an answer, and somehow it was worse. Today. Good. Then he gave me an address. A small brick building downtown. Nothing flashy. Nothing that suggested the conversation waiting inside could change the story of my entire life. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Marcus Hale. He looked exactly like I imagined a retired attorney would look. Gray suit, silver hair, careful eyes. The kind of man who listened more than he spoke. On the desk between us sat a thick file. My name was written on it. Claire Bennett. I stared at it. How long have you had that? Almost 11 years. I felt a chill. 11 years. That was not a coincidence. That was preparation. Marcus folded his hands. Your grandmother was one of the smartest clients I ever had. I'm starting to realize that. A faint smile crossed his face. She suspected something long before there was evidence. About my parents? Yes. I looked down. That hurt more than I expected, because part of me still wanted someone to tell me this was all a misunderstanding, a mistake, a paperwork issue, not a decade-long betrayal. Marcus opened the file. Inside were copies of bank statements, trust documents, letters, account records, and then he slid one page toward me. Do you recognize this? I looked at it. My breath caught. It was my grandmother's signature. Beneath it was a handwritten note. If Claire ever comes looking for answers, show her everything. Everything. Not some of it. Not the polite version. Everything. I swallowed. Show me. Marcus nodded. Then he pulled out another document. This one made my stomach drop. Trust account summary. Initial deposit, $62,000. I blinked, then blinked again. $62,000. Not 12, not 15, not 20, 62. I stared at him. My parents told me there was almost nothing left. I know. Then where did it go? Marcus looked directly at me. That is where things become interesting. For the next hour, we went through records, one transaction at a time, one withdrawal at a time, one lie at a time. The first few years looked normal. Small expenses, school-related payments, expected activity. Then things changed. Daniel turned 16. Suddenly, money started moving. Large amounts. Tuition, business investments, vehicle purchases, personal transfers. I felt sick because every excuse my parents ever gave me was sitting on those pages. Only now I could see the truth behind it. The money had never disappeared. It had simply changed owners, over and over, until almost nothing remained. Marcus slid another paper toward me. This is where I became concerned. I looked down. Wire transfer, $18,000. Destination, Bennett Restaurant Holdings. Daniel's restaurant. The same restaurant my parents claimed they were trying to save. The same restaurant they now wanted me to help finance. They were asking me to rescue a business already built using my money. I laughed. A short, hollow sound. Marcus didn't interrupt. You know the worst part? What? I think they genuinely believe they did nothing wrong. His expression darkened. I believe you are correct. When I left the office, I felt different. Not stronger, not yet, just clearer. For years I had been fighting shadows. Now I had documents, evidence, facts. And facts do not care who the favorite child is. 3 days later, my mother appeared at my apartment. Unannounced, of course. She knocked exactly the way she always had. 3 quick taps, as if every door belonged to her. I opened it. She immediately looked annoyed. Why haven't you answered my calls? Why are you here? Claire? No, answer my question. Her eyes narrowed. That was new. Normally I backed down. Normally I apologized. Not anymore. I came because your father is worried. I almost laughed. Dad wasn't worried. Dad was terrified. There's a difference. What do you want? She stepped inside without permission, still acting like she owned every room she entered. You've been talking to people. I stared at her. Interesting. Not. How are you? Not. Can we fix this? Not. I'm sorry. The first thing she cared about was information. What people? The bank. Silence. Then, the lawyer. More silence. Her face changed, just slightly, enough. You knew there was a lawyer. She crossed her arms. Your grandmother was paranoid. No. I shook my head. She was prepared. My mother looked away. For the first time in my life, I saw uncertainty in her, a crack in the certainty she always carried. It lasted less than a second. Then it disappeared. You owe this family more than paperwork. There it was again, the phrase, you owe us. I had heard it my entire life. When I skipped vacations to save money. You owe us. When I paid for groceries. You owe us. When I helped Daniel. You owe us. When I sacrificed. You owe us. Always, always, always. I looked at her. Tell me something. What? If Grandma left the money for Daniel instead of me. She frowned. What? If it had been his account. I stepped closer. Would you have taken it? She didn't answer. And that was the answer. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, not because of what she said, because of what she didn't. No denial, no explanation, no outrage, nothing, just justification. And that realization hurt worse than any financial loss. They knew. They always knew. The next morning, another surprise arrived. An email from Marcus. Subject: Additional records. Attached were 37 pages. I opened them while drinking coffee. 3 minutes later, I nearly dropped the mug. One page contained copies of old correspondence, letters between my grandmother and my father. Most were ordinary. Then I found one, dated 12 years ago. I read it twice, then a third time, and my hands started shaking. Dad, I am concerned about repeated withdrawals. The funds belong to Claire, not Daniel, not you, not anyone else. If this continues, I will be forced to take legal action. Margaret. I stared at the screen. My father knew, not suspected, knew. 12 years ago. He had been warned. Explicitly, directly, in writing. The money belongs to Claire. Yet he kept taking it. And somehow, that discovery hurt more than everything else combined. Because I had always believed Dad was weak, passive, a follower, maybe controlled by Mom. But this letter destroyed that illusion. He wasn't a bystander. He was a participant. A week later, Marcus called. I think we should meet again. What happened? There's another issue. Of course there was. Every answer seemed to create 3 new questions. What issue? A pause. Then, there may be assets that were never disclosed. I sat upright. What kind of assets? Property. My heart skipped. What property? That, he said carefully, is what we're trying to determine. The next meeting changed everything. Because the money? The money was never the real story. The money was just the doorway. Marcus laid several documents on the table. Property records, tax filings, corporate registrations, and one address. A commercial property, purchased 15 years earlier. I stared at it. Why does this matter? Look at the ownership history. I did. Then froze. Original owner, Margaret Bennett, my grandmother, transferred into a trust. Then, nothing. No sale, no closure, no liquidation. The property still existed. Wait! I looked up. You're saying Grandma owned this? Yes. And nobody told me? Yes. I leaned back. How much is it worth? Marcus removed his glasses. Current market estimate? He slid over another page. I looked, then looked again, then again, because my brain refused to process the number. $1.8 million. I felt the room go silent. The money from the account suddenly seemed tiny. A footnote, a distraction, a decoy. Marcus nodded slowly. Now you understand why your grandmother created so many safeguards. I did. Finally. The trust fund wasn't the treasure, the property was. And if my parents had successfully buried the account history, I never would have found it, never would have asked questions, never would have discovered the building, never would have learned the truth. Which raised a terrifying question. Had they known about it too? Marcus watched me carefully. You're asking the right question. I swallowed. And? He opened another folder. Inside was a document signed 7 years earlier, a proposal attempting to gain control of the property, submitted by David Bennett, my father. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I couldn't even feel anger, only exhaustion, because every new discovery revealed another betrayal underneath it, like digging through layers of rot. My father hadn't merely taken money. He had spent years trying to gain control of something worth nearly $2 million and failed because my grandmother anticipated him. Every step, every move, every excuse. She saw him clearly long before I did. Marcus leaned forward. Claire. I looked up. The property is yours. Silence. Legally. More silence. No one can challenge it? They can try. My stomach tightened. And will they? Marcus gave me a look that answered everything. Yes, of course they would. The favorite child was running out of options. The restaurant was failing. The money trail was exposed. And now there was a property worth nearly $2 million. They would come. The only question was how far they were willing to go. And for the first time, I was ready to find out. Because this was no longer about recovering money, it was about ending a lie that had shaped my entire life. And I finally had something I had never possessed before. Proof. And soon, everyone in my family was going to learn exactly what that meant.